there are so many other ways to get the story out that don't cost anything anymore because the technology is there. Before, as you see, you had to watch ABC, CBS, NBC, the major national shows, right? And stations and
Right.
studios. And now you see content creators everywhere. It's interesting. There's so many people that love the idea of publishing a story or writing an article, and then you take it to that next level and, maybe write a book. And then from there, hey, let's make it into a movie. But first and foremost, you have to have a compelling subject. Tell me a little bit about your journey. How did you get into the idea of actually writing a book? What was your motivation?
Well, after my mom and dad passed away, I grew up in upstate New York and outside of Schenectady. And after they passed away, Stan and I went like once a month. We went to their house, to clean it out so that we could put it on the real estate market. And one of the times that we were there, we were up in the attic and found a huge trunk in the attic, right?
Dead bodies or something good?
Not dead bodies, no. How about maybe 350 letters that my father had written to my mother during World War II?
Wow. 350. So that's, if you wrote every single day, that's a year and change. How long was he over there?
He was it started when he went to boot camp, the letters, and then it went all the way through till when he got wounded crossing the Rhine River, March 28th, 1945. And he continued writing letters until January 1946.
When did he go in again, did you say?
43.
He went in he enlisted November 1942, and then he went to boot camp in June 1943 at Fort McClellan in Alabama.
Wow. So you found these letters,
right?
And obviously, you had to put them in order. You had to figure out, okay, well, what are they about, right? Like, what's tell me.
They're love letters, Frank.
I don't even know what that means.
Well, what I should say is my mom and dad were writing about their feelings for each other. They're very loving. They're very sweet. They're wonderful. But the other thing is, my dad also wrote enormously about his experiences during the war, and told mom about everything that he was allowed to. He ended up going to Europe on the Queen Mary.
Wow.
And he couldn't tell her that was the ship he was on. And the other thing is that our soldiers had to destroy the letters that they got from their sweethearts and from their families, because the army was afraid that the enemy would be able to figure out where they were stationed, and they didn't want that to happen.
Wow.
So
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
that can you imagine that in today's day and age, where you tell somebody to turn off their phone or put their phone down, and they just put it in their pocket and tell you they don't have a phone anymore? Operational security was a little different back then, right?
What we ended up doing was all the letters were in envelopes. I put them in chronological order. Then we took them out, the actual letters. There was some days there was a couple of letters, and we converted all of the original letters to Word documents. After we converted all the documents, just about all of them, to Word documents, then I scanned each of the original letters, maybe 85% of them. So they're all as PDFs. And then we, in our local paper, someone put together there was an article about someone who had letters from the Civil War. And we met with the person who published that book and got hooked up with a publisher, a graphic designer, and an editor.
Right.
And that's how everything got cooking. It was a process that took just probably almost 2.5 years.
So the beauty of that and understanding that process is you didn't have to recreate a business model. You were able to leverage somebody's experience and were able to really avoid so many of the early pitfalls that someone else may have made with trying to publish that data. How did that? What were the pieces? So you spoke to the person who had the book published, and she put you in touch with. What was the process? Who were you introduced to, and then what were the critical components? Were there anything in particular that you were invited to that wasn't great?
She led us to the person and gave us the phone number. It turned out that it wasn't a big box like you see a TV commercial and someone says, "Let us help you publish a book." This was more it was directly one-on-one with the publisher. We contacted her. She gave us what the process was going to be, and then she hooked us up with this editor who she's been working with, just one person, and a graphic designer. So it was really on a personal level that we worked with getting this published.
That's
and
great.
It was like a daily, weekly process with me sending information to them, what we had for the editor, and putting it. So it went that way. It was good. It was one-on-one.
Yeah. Why don't you turn that camera so we can see you a little more, Stan? Because you were so involved in this process. It's important to note that this was a team effort. It's very difficult to do something by yourself when you have full-time commitments. What amount of time would you say that you spent on this project? That would also be considered billable hours. I assume that both of you are still employed and working in the workforce.
It was over 2 years.
Yeah.
It was night and
Yeah.
I told Paula I was going to push her when we converted the letters.
Yeah.
And it was like, it started out, Paula read the original letters, and I was putting them into Word documents, and then I made a few mistakes. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. And then we changed it. I laid on the couch, and Paula used my laptop, and I read the letters. And so we try to do 3 or 4 letters a night.
Wow.
I was typing the letters.
That's got to be a lot of emotional, EQ, right? There's just a ton of that when you're, you almost have to get into the headspace to really do this justice, right?
Absolutely.
I have to tell you that this was an incredibly emotional experience. And I got to know my father in a way that I never knew him growing up. I just didn't know the person that I got to know reading those letters. And it was magical. It really was. My dad was a very serious, hardworking sort of guy and not emotional. And reading these letters was just the opposite of that. And I just thought, this is who he was. This is the person he was. And it was very clear how much my mom and dad loved each other, and it was just, well, magical is the best word, I guess. It was
Yeah.
it really was an incredibly wonderful experience.
What I find fascinating when I talk to people who have done something out of the ordinary, extraordinary, we would say that's the greatest generation, right? And you knew
Yeah,
him as dad. You knew him as entrepreneur, small business owner. You knew him
right.
as dad. You didn't know him as, Purple Heart recipient, numerous medal recipient.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, and I recently met a professional, somewhat hero, someone who I believe truly did us society a great service on retirement plans and some things that I think are very fascinating. And I thanked him because I was like, thank you so much for the work that you've done. And he said, yeah, tell that to my kids. They don't know
Oh,
anything.
yeah,
You know?
yep. And the thing is, my mother was a very spiritual person,
Mhm.
um, and a very loving person as a mother, um, and you know, but their relationship, i- when my brother and I were growing up with them, was, I still think it was private.
Mhm.
There was so much that was private between them
Mhm.
that we just didn't know anything about, and probably didn't understand at all,
Mhm.
how they really felt about each other and what they had been through.
Mhm.
Um, it's amazing to me that my mother, especially after my dad passed away, that my mother didn't take me up to the attic and show me that trunk of letters.
Mhm.
Why didn't she do that? I mean, it was, what
Well,
was
as
it
you
that,
said before, maybe it was private, right? That was
yeah,
between she
yeah,
wanted you to find out about it after the fact, right?
maybe that's
Maybe
it.
it would have
Maybe that's,
changed just too much. Now, on that, I know that I had thought about it. I found some of the records that my father had, just a couple of letters here and there, back and forth from the family when he was in military service in Korea. Nothing to the extent of yours, but I had considered at some point in the past, maybe documenting some of those letters or putting something together, because I know that the Library of Congress will, you know, uh, basically take that, put it in the Library of Congress so that it lives forever. Have you
right.
looked at that? Have you heard of that? Have you done that?
I've got, I have a letter from the Library of Congress that they sent
Wow,
to me.
that's great.
Yep. Um, and this really, I guess part of it started because I was working on my genealogy.
Mm-hmm.
And there's, my dad has, in his ancestry, there are like four stories that are, I keep thinking that we should publish those as well.
Mm-hmm.
Three other stories that should be published. Um, they're amazing. Um,
So, what
he
would be the process in that? So, you did the first book. Obviously, there's
Right.
going to be readership, and have you considered like key performance type metrics to figure out what the publishing break even is, and then that would then fund the second book, or are these more hobbies? And what would you consider those projects to look like?
Not not a full book, Frank, because there's not enough data, but they're interesting sub stories of some uh, interesting points in time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
One of my dad's ancestors won the Congressional Medal of Honor at
Wow.
Gettysburg.
Wow. Wow.
Yep.
He led the first Union troops, the first battle with the Confederates at Gettysburg.
Wow.
I also have, I have a whaling log from 1840, and this is another ancestor of my father, who grew up in Troy, New York, and at 17 went to Nantucket and got on a whaler and was on it for 3.5 years and kept a log, and I have the log.
Wow, that sounds like a phenomenal story. Wow, whaling. Is that how your family ended up from New York over in Massachusetts, or was there a different story to that?
Well, what's interesting is that my dad was born in New York City, but he growing up, he did live in Boston. His father was running this Baldwin piano and organ store in downtown Boston, and he lived in Boston. They also lived in Salem. I don't know if any of the people listening have heard of Salem Willows, but that's also in Massachusetts. And my grandfather bought a house at Cape Cod, and that was our vacation every summer, was
Mhm.
going to Cape Cod. So, I always went to school growing up in upstate New York, but we certainly had ties to the Boston area,
Mhm.
definitely.
So tell me about the book. What's it called?
The book is called Sealed with a Kiss because that is the way my father signed um, the letters that he wrote
Yeah,
to my
hold
mom.
that up so we can see it a little bit better.
Wait a minute. Can you see it?
I can. That's great. And what's
Sealed
it?
with a Kiss.
Yeah, and we know what it's about. We know it's their love letters. Tell me about the book. Tell me about the process. Tell me about like what you're doing after you've gotten the book published. Now you guys are doing some shows. You're going out and promoting the book. Have you had some local coverage, and what else?
Well, we're going to the VFW this week. We've gone to some senior centers because it's very meaningful for this greatest generation because they are almost gone.
Mhm.
My dad would have been 100 years old last summer,
Wow.
and he this generation, when we the last senior center that we went to, we were doing our PowerPoint and going through the book, and people in the audience were crying. I
Mhm.
mean, they were and this has happened often when you talk about it,
Mhm.
that they start to cry.
Mhm.
And it's very meaningful for this generation. And so I I love that it's about the greatest generation, and they deserve the credit. They deserve, well, where's our acknowledgement? Um Hold on. What? Hold on a
I think that what I've seen lately is you've got speed of information such that, like, we went from telling your buddies that you're going to meet them at a certain time at a certain place to then calling them to then texting them, and now no one has any attention span and patience to do any long form content, whether that be reading a book. Now you can listen to Audible and it'll read it to you. So have you considered any other mediums other than paperback or other than a book, like maybe having
I
reading it and dictating it and putting it up on a different platform as well?
um I have to tell you, and I think about this every day, this story has movie written all over it. And that may sound ridiculous, but I can't help but think that this is um I I I just think it is a movie because it's a love story, but it's so much about the war. I mean, he almost lost his right arm. Um, he was in General Patton's army. Um, he, Wait, I want to read you one thing. Um, Hold on. Where's page 182? 182.
I think there's a band.
Hold on. It's coming.
But that point about the
Okay.
movie and different meat.
He wrote this to my mom in 1945.
6 days before he got wounded,
Okay, 6 days before he was wounded.
severely wounded.
If anyone ever asks you what I do in the Army, you can tell them I lead an infantry rifle platoon. And when you tell them, you can be proud of it. I know I am, and I can honestly say there's not a tougher job in the Army. The men in an infantry rifle platoon are the ones who fire M1 rifles and use bayonets and hand grenades, and often fight hand to hand with the enemy. I know it's true because I've done those things with them. And when I say I'm a rifle platoon leader, I'm darn proud of it. And
That goes to, I think that goes to kind of a vision of duty that may have been watered down in the generations that succeeded it. And I think that's what made it the golden generation, or the greatest generation, is the amount of duty that generation had was amazing. Putting aside their personal or mental reservations about anything. When someone said jump, they said how high. When someone said,
yes,
shoot, they said which direction. It was just a different time, and now we don't see that same motivation and that same desire to work for a common goal. And I think that's something that is lost, and something that maybe stories such as these would be helpful to maybe try to bring back.
Frank, going back to one of you, like a few minutes ago, you had asked about getting the word of the book out. So the editor and I put together a media kit that I've been going through historical societies in New England, the New York, the Schenectady area, VFW's American Legion post in the Boston, New England area, newspapers, and I've sent this media kit to these places, and that's how the work that has to go into doing the marketing. Mm-hmm. It's sort of like extracting email addresses from different, like, historical societies. My latest list is senior centers locally, and that's pretty good. It's not a big list, but those are people who congregate at senior centers in cities or towns in different communities. And they're going to be the ones who are pretty interested in this at the time.
Yeah, I think that's critical to have, when you have that project finished and complete, now you have to get the word out and you have to start trying to monetize it. And I think what a lot of media creators and content creators miss the point on when they monetize. I do this show and there's no monetization. This is just for information. This is to try to get the word out on different things and different people being able to do what they're finding joy in, like this. But once you're trying to monetize it, you need to have, especially with a media company, a media kit. You have to show what you're doing, what you're selling it for, what you're able to do, and what you're going to charge for that. So that media kit is critical along most media companies. And it's baffling when you see a media company that doesn't have a media kit talking about what they do, what they can shop, what they advertise. So that's, again, you have something to sell, but you don't want to do it for free, right?
Right.
So back on the different types of media. And again, I know that you said that it would be a great movie. Before you get to the movie section, you need to have people that are interested in it. So going back to, I think, Sohail, you might have had a question about the forms, correct?
Yeah. So I was curious about, have you looked into what those next steps look like if you wanted to turn it into either a web series or a little docu-series or even a narrative film? Or have you thought about the options between those three? Because this screams to me narrative film, but also a docu-series, which is
and Paula, just to give you
shop around.
Just for a little background, I Sohail has just recently decided to fill out his LinkedIn profile, which I did not know that he's a graduate of University of Texas's acclaimed film school.
I thought the big thing was going to be, publishing the book, but it's not. It is, but the next step is very important. So that's what we're working on, and it sounds like maybe Sohail's someone that we should be talking to.
You are.
Absolutely,
You're talking to him right now. Why do you think we're not on the line right now?
That's right.
That's why we're talking about the different ways that people get so focused and tunnel vision on finishing the project, but then you realize that there's a lot of work. That's just the beginning, right? You finished the work, which was hard, 2.5 years worth of work, and now getting the word out, getting the gospel out. Not everybody can get on to a super celebrities book club and immediately sell, New York Times bestseller. So these moves are critical, as well as, getting the content out there in a way that will motivate people. So what are some of the biggest lessons that you learned in the book, or writing the book, or that you think are in the book? Like, for example, you mentioned recently, briefly, his pride in what he did and what he was doing and what he was doing on mission. What are some of the other things that you learned about your father that you think would be beneficial for anyone looking at a project like this?
I have a family member who didn't want me to do the book. He thought it was too private and too personal, but we talked about it, and we sort of agreed it was okay for me to go forward. But it turned out that one of the things that was very personal and beautiful, in my view, that my father's best friend in the Army, from officer candidate school, his name was Michael O'Connor, and he was killed in Europe before my father was deployed. And my brother's name is Michael. And I love that my father never forgot about that. We didn't really know why my brother was named Michael, but that's why.
And did you find that in one of the letters? Was that actually specifically mentioned in one of the letters? Wow, that's great. Isn't that wonderful to have that that's the documentation. That's what makes this important.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, he wrote to one of the letters he wrote, he said, "Sweetheart, it's very difficult for me to write to you today." And he told her about what had happened to his best friend, Michael. And it was, it was heartbreaking for him. It really was. But we have the letter where he tells her what happened. The other thing,
great,
the other thing doesn't have to do, well, maybe it does have to do with the war. I'm beginning to wonder about it. When we were growing up, we'd go to church on Sunday, and I would stand next to my father, and I would hold half of the hymnal, and he would hold the other half. And I'd hold one half with one hand, and he'd hold the other half with the other hand. And the hymnal started to shake. And I noticed this, when we were going to church. And finally, I said something to my mother, and I thought it was because of his wound from the war, because his arm was never really the same afterward. But
excuse me, Paula.
Yeah.
He got hit by an M88 German shell, and it fractured his right arm and severed all the nerves. That was, I already said this, March 28th, 1945. And he immediately went to England, and that's where he rehabbed until he was brought back to the States. And he wrote the letters with his left hand when he was in the hospital, and we could read them better than his other letters. Sorry.
But that's okay. No, that's fine. But it turned out that my dad at age 42 was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease.
So I wanted to say real quick that so although it's not set behind the backdrop of the war, my parents were my mom was in America for like 4 or 5 years studying, and my dad was in India, and my mom had met my dad in India and they fell in love. But my mom's parents were like, okay, y'all have to get your degrees and then y'all can get married, which is a big deal in Indian culture because they were the first love
Right.
marriage. It was arranged marriages. And my dad would write my mom letters, and we have boxes of these letters, and I want to go through that. So the whole
You
I feel like this hits close to home for a lot of people that have parents or grandparents that were in the letter writing generation, and
yes.
we were talking about your book, which is about the love letters your dad wrote to your mom during World War II when he was at war, and how we could get that message out there. And it's by doing things like this also. So to get to the movie or get interest, just like you could self-publish and didn't have to go through traditional channels like going to the Penguin or like going to through like super traditional channels of publishing a book. Now we have non-traditional channels of getting your message out there through video content, social content, which all it takes is picking up your phone or you have a laptop right there with a webcam, and
Right.
and just like you're telling us, telling these stories, and you'd be surprised what gains traction with no money behind it on social media platforms, especially when it pulls at the heartstrings. So I just wanted to give that little,
Well, thank you.
insight.
Thank you so much. I hope you go through your letters because it will mean the world to you.
So to discuss that a little deeper, one of the things that I've brought to your attention in the past as well has been working on that total addressable market. Most of the channels that I believe you guys are pursuing, the VFW, some of the nursing homes, and some of those places are
Right.
Historical societies.
yeah, historical. Those are focusing on seems like an older audience, and older
Yes.
audiences, while they are still the ones that will buy traditional media, as Sohail mentioned, there are so many other ways to get the story out that don't cost anything anymore because the technology is there. Before, as you see, you had to watch ABC, CBS, NBC, the major national shows, right? And stations and
Right.
studios. And now you see content creators everywhere. You don't have to go to a major house. Yeah, if you want it to look prettier, eventually someone might pick it up and do it better. But in the short term, have you considered some of those channels? Doesn't sound like you have. Would you consider
No.
them?
So, oh yes, yes. I mean, we need help figuring out how to do that. I mean, I would do it in a second.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay.
I'm right here. I have your
Oh,
contact now. I can definitely guide you.
Yeah, and I'm sure we're going to cut this big chunk out and not talk about this part of it because I think this is something that Sohail could work with. One of the things that I found fascinating whenever I did, and I haven't, and I will share with Sohail the book itself so that he could read it. One of the things that when we discussed it was how, because people don't seem to have the time to focus on reading a whole book, right? Because everyone has such a
yes.
shorter attention spans, consider pulling out some of those individual stories, make them into vignettes, maybe discuss some of those things on as you mentioned, on your own content. I don't know how you monetize that. I guess that's something that professional help from
Well, I
someone
love
would
that
help you with that.
idea, but it also makes me think, and I've said this to many people, it's a wonderful book to read because you don't have to sit for an hour and read. You can read for 20 minutes, read several of the stories, read it's a great book when you don't have a whole afternoon to sit and read because it's in pieces. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, this sounds like something that you would want like on next to your bookshelf or sorry, next to your
Yeah.
bedside, because you said that you read like 3 a night and tried to process 3 a night, and it was deep and difficult, right? So just imagine reading the whole book filled with letters. It's, you know,
Right.
it's like going into a big, huge museum and expecting to get through the whole thing in one day, right? Hard,
Exactly.
hard.
So,
you know.
Frank, I put together a timeline, I called it, and the editor calls them annotations. So we work together, and before each one of the letters, it's a description of what's going on during the war when he was writing these letters. So that's just a little different because it's basically letters.
Yeah.
And there's the beginning of the book that people need to know that you got to put together data, and then at the end of the book, acknowledgments, dedications. That's what Paula did, all that kind of stuff. So people need to know that's the additional work for doing this kind of book.
Right.
That's awesome. It sounds like they are fully formed vignettes, not just simply, not just a compilation of the letters. There's that research you did. So for people like me or people who may see this clip on Instagram or TikTok or Facebook, could you describe a little more about how the format of the book caters to like being read as vignettes? How?
Not sure.
Being read as what?
As vignettes, or being able to read it in micro sections instead of having to read the whole book. Just expound upon that, because I think that's important. That'll be a good marketing asset for you.
I mean, it's all by date. I mean, it's like letter number 2 is Sunday, August 1st, 1943. That's letter number 2. And
go back to 282. No, 182.
Wait a minute, 182.
So basically, I think that what's interesting and what's important is that, you know, because you have a specific date and time on that each letter, you can actually take a snapshot of what was going on during the war at that time outside of what the story is that he's going to cover. Like, I think of Band of Brothers, and you could actually see what they were doing at that time, what the total operation looked like that they were in, and what his mindset was going through that operation, which is really fascinating because you see a day in the life of a soldier of a rifle company, right? So this is what that was like, right?
So,
and so being able to tell that story of that day and not having to read the entire book at once.
Exactly. On March 20th, 1945, it says at the top, Paul is in Holland, not fighting, resting up after a 20-mile hike to the rear. And then he starts the letter. Hi, Itchy. Used to call her Itchy. Hi, Itchy. Another day over. It's beginning to feel like spring over here now. It can't come too soon to suit me. But it's so...
Show that.
Okay, he's going to show you. But it's so easy to just read a little bit. Do you know what I mean? And then
Hang on, Stanley.
and think about it. Let it sit in your heart, you know, and think about it.
Hang on, Stanley.
You see that, Frank? There's a big description. These are the annotations timeline that I worked with the editor with, and then the letters there. But this is a bigger description.
What's that? Oh, this one?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's great.
On March 26th, there was no letter. The 320th and 137th regiments crossed the Rhine on the Doe-Foot Bridge. They were east of Rheinberg, Germany. With the 320th in reserve, the 134th and 137th pushed into the Ruhr region. The 35th was crossing the Rhine River. Paul writes that the war against Germany shouldn't last much longer. So there's, you know,
what was the year? When was that?
That was 1945, March 27th.
That was the day before he got wounded when they crossed the Rhine River into Germany.
And just think about what his thoughts were on how long the war was going to go on from then. It shouldn't be much longer. Shouldn't be much longer. Just
I
over that
know.
hill. Just
I
over that
know.
hill. Right.
I know. It's really but it's such a it's so easy to just read a piece of it, you know, and then you can think about it and then go on and read another piece, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every doctor's office needs to have a copy as you sit and wait in the waiting room.
Yeah.
There's the healthcare system we know and love, right?
Right. Right.
Wait 2 hours for your 7 minutes.
That's right. We've got lots of pictures in the book too. So that's important to know, I think.
And the scanned letters. Like I scanned a gazillion things one at a time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I have another question. So let's say I go through my parents' letters and I want to write a book.
Right.
What's your advice to me? What if I want to write a book that is basically a memoirs or, you know, telling someone else's story? What is not only your editorial advice, but what's your advice business-wise?
I can't hear.
He wants to know how to go about writing his parents' book.
Oh.
I mean, I guess chronologically was the way we looked at it. That's the way we did it chronologically.
They were all in envelopes, so we set them up by date, and then just physically took them out, and read them and put them into Word documents.
Okay, I think he was talking about.
Yeah, so once I get the story and the book written, then what would your advice be? How would I seek out publishing? I know you've done your research as to which channels are available to you. What was your story and what did you discover there?
When I saw the article in the local paper, I knew we had these letters. I said, this is exactly what we should do with the letters. This person, so we didn't go searching around. And I think I said it earlier. You can, on TV, there's a gazillion commercials for people who do publishing. We were fortunate that the person was local and we had a more personal working relationship with the publisher, the designer, the editor. So we didn't really do like a lot to try to find somebody.
Yeah, so it sounds like you actually focused on, you knew that you wanted to write a book. You didn't care about writing a movie. You didn't care about writing a screenplay. You didn't want to do it for articles in a paper. Like you wanted a book and you had you just wanted to get from point A to point B and get from source material to book. You didn't focus on anything else. And so that was your step one. So moving forward, now you'll probably try to consult and figure out other ways to get some of the content out.
I think that's exactly right.
So Paula, if somebody wants to find the book and get some information, can they find it on Amazon? And what would they do? Where would they look it up? What's the title again?
Sealed with a Kiss. There are lots of books named Sealed with a Kiss. So it says Sealed with a Kiss, World War II love stories.
And how about we'll put a link in the description to make it easy.
Yeah.
Frank, the last page of the PowerPoint, it has the Amazon link. And then the actual people who are printing the book, they have it online. And the publisher, that's not on this page.
Great. So we'll put that
all
up.
the info
it's on
and put it on there.
It's great.
Yeah.
Well, thanks you guys for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We appreciate you very, very much.
You got it. You guys have a great day. You know, once we get it through post-production, he'll also provide a link, and I'll forward you the link to the actual show, as well as they'll continue to put on little short form, little videos and snippets for the people that are not necessarily focused on the whole hour presentation.
Yeah. So
And Frank,
Yeah.
you look awesome. I love your beard and I love your hair.
Well,
You look great.
apparently nobody likes ties anymore. So, and then nobody meets in person. So why shave? So
No, it looks great. I love it.
great.
Paula's going to send you an email
Okay.
for the publisher. And on her website, she has the books listed on there.
I
Okay.
could send it to Sohill too.
Yeah.
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 That's
I'll-
where it is. I have to go to work.
All right, guys.
All right.
Take
Great
care.
meeting y'all. I'll stay in touch. Okay.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
All right.
Thank you a million. Thank you
got it.
so
Yep.
much.
All right. Talk to you guys later. Hey, you. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Money in the Bank with Frank. If you like that, hit the subscribe button. We have plenty more content like that on the Merge TV, and we look forward to seeing you next time.